I, 26M, need to get this out somewhere because what's happening right now is wild. And I want people to understand the full picture before I explain what I did about it. I grew up with my parents Daryl, 54, and Leanne, 51, and my younger brother Caleb, 22. Mid-sized town, three-bedroom house, nothing special. Dad worked at an industrial supply warehouse. Mom did part-time reception at a dental office. The issue was always me versus Caleb. He was 4 years younger, and from the day he could talk, that kid could do no wrong. If we fought, I started it. If something broke, I did it. If Caleb failed a test, I should have helped him study. The reason was simple. Caleb had respiratory problems as a toddler, in and out of hospitals at 2 and 3. He recovered fully, but my parents never got past it. They decided he was fragile, and I was the tough one who could handle anything. So everything went to Caleb, and I got whatever was left over, which was nothing. I wasn't a bad kid either. Decent grades, part-time job bussing tables from 15, no trouble. Didn't matter. I was assigned my role. The difficult one. The one who should be grateful for a roof. The night they kicked me out was a Thursday in October. I was 17. Caleb got caught shoplifting at a department store with two friends. Store called my parents, they picked him up. When they got home, Caleb was crying, Mom was panicking, and Dad was furious. But not at Caleb, at me. Because apparently I was supposed to be watching him that afternoon, even though nobody told me, and I was at work. Dad went off about how I was never around, how I didn't care about this family. I told him Caleb was 13 and made his own choice to steal, and I was at my job earning money because they wouldn't give me any. Mom jumped in saying I always had excuses and a real brother would have been there. I told them they were blaming me for something their golden child did, and it was insane. Dad said if I didn't like how things worked in his house, I could leave. I said fine, I'd find somewhere. He said, no, he meant tonight. Mom didn't argue. She told me I'd come crawling back within a month because I had no idea how the real world worked. I packed what fit in my backpack in a garbage bag, walked out, and Dad slammed the door behind me. I didn't come back. I had about $400 from the diner. I called my coworker Dennis, who was 21, and he let me crash on his couch. Those first 2 years were brutal. 3 months on that couch until Dennis's landlord found out. Cheap room rentals after that. Garbage food, double shifts. Got my GED because I couldn't finish high school properly. No lucky break, no magical turnaround. I just kept going because every single day I woke up angry, and that was the only fuel I had. And here's what I need people to understand. I didn't grind just to build a life. I did it because every time I pictured my mom telling me I'd be back begging, I wanted to prove her wrong so badly it drove me forward. Every raise, every new apartment, every skill I picked up, I filed it away. Not just as progress, as ammunition. I knew they'd come calling eventually. People who throw someone away always end up needing that person back. I was going to be ready. By 22, I had a stable logistics job, my own apartment, a decent car. By 24, I'd moved to a bigger city, got promoted twice, started saving real money. Not rich, but comfortable and completely self-made. $0 from them, 0 calls to them. I changed my number twice, but I kept one channel open. My old phone stayed in a drawer, charged, with my dad's number unblocked, because I was waiting. 3 weeks ago, I pulled that phone out. 19 missed calls, 11 from Dad, 8 from Mom, and a string of texts from Caleb, who got my number from one of them. Caleb's texts were long, my parents were short. Dad's last one just said, please call us back. It's important. Mom said almost the same. I read every single one and I didn't call back. Not yet. I'd waited 9 years for this and I wasn't going to waste it being reactive. I texted Caleb one line. What's going on? What he told me next changed everything. I'll share what Caleb said and what I did in an update. But I want to say this now. I am not that 17-year-old kid with a garbage bag anymore. I have resources, patience, and 9 years of anger that never went away. Whatever they need from me, they're about to find out what it costs to throw away your kid and then come asking for help. More soon. All right, so I gotta be real. Keeping a phone in a drawer for 9 years charged and waiting. That is a level of long-term emotional strategy that most people cannot even apply to a gym membership. This man was running a revenge savings account and a revenge phone simultaneously. Most of us can't even hold a grudge through a full Netflix season. And this dude was out here treating resentment like a 401k, just letting it compound year over year. And honestly, I'm not even mad at it, because when you get thrown out at 17, not 18, not after graduation, 17, over something your little brother did, and your own mother stands there telling you you'll be crawling back, like that's not strict parenting. That's not tough love. That's a family deciding you're expendable. and then being genuinely shocked when the thing they threw away turns out to be the only thing that worked. $400 and a garbage bag. That was his entire inheritance. And he turned it into the only lifeline these people have left. I'm locked in for this one. Update 1. All right, a lot of you asked for the update, so here it is. Buckle up because this got way more complicated than I expected. So Caleb texted me back after I asked what was going on. The short version, my parents were about to lose the house. But the full version is what matters here because it's not just about money, it's about everything they built their lives around finally falling apart. About 2 years ago, my dad got laid off from the warehouse. He'd been there over 20 years and they cut his whole department. He picked up work at a smaller place but for way less money. Around the same time, my mom's dental office reduced her hours because they brought in a younger full-time receptionist. So both their incomes dropped hard. They refinanced the house at some point to pay for things, and Caleb told me they'd been behind on the mortgage for about 8 months. They were facing foreclosure proceedings starting within 60 days. But here's where it gets interesting and why I didn't just shrug and delete the texts. Caleb also told me that he'd been living at home this whole time, 22 years old, no degree, working part-time at a grocery store. The kid they poured everything into. All that protection and favoritism and special treatment. And he was bagging groceries and living in his childhood bedroom. Not because he's stupid, but because they never made him do anything hard. They never let him struggle. They never told him to figure it out the way they told me. And now they were all going down together. I sat on this for 2 days. I want to be real with you guys. Part of me wanted to just text back LOL and turn the phone off forever. But that's not what I'd been planning for 9 years. Walking away would mean they learned nothing. They'd just tell themselves I was always the selfish one and they were right about me. No. I needed them to understand exactly what they did and exactly what it cost them. And I needed Caleb to see it too. So I called Caleb. First time I'd heard his voice in 9 years. He sounded older, obviously, but also nervous. I kept it short and calm. I told him I wanted to meet in person before I talked to Mom and Dad, and I wanted to meet just us. He agreed immediately. We met that Saturday at a parking lot near a hardware store halfway between our towns. About a 90-minute drive for each of us. Caleb showed up in Dad's old truck, the same one from when I was a kid. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. We sat on the tailgate, and I let him talk first. He went through everything again, more details this time. Dad had been trying to negotiate with the mortgage company but kept missing deadlines. Mom had started selling things around the house online to make small payments. They'd burned through whatever savings they had. Caleb said Dad was in bad shape mentally, barely talking, just sitting in front of the TV. Mom was the one making all the calls, including the ones to me. Then Caleb said the thing that made me realize this was going to be even bigger than the house. He told me that Mom and Dad wanted me to come back and help because they believed I owed it to the family. Not asked, not hoped, believed. As in, Leanne had actually told Caleb that after everything they did, raising me and putting a roof over my head for 17 years, the least I could do was help when they needed it. She actually thought I owed them. After kicking me out as a minor with a garbage bag, I asked Caleb straight up if he agreed with that, and he hesitated. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. He started talking about how family is family, and how they were struggling, and maybe we could all just move past it. I told him to stop right there. I asked him if he remembered that Thursday night. He said he did, but he was 13. I told him I remembered every single second of it and that I'd been waiting for this exact situation for 9 years. Not hoping for it, planning for it. That shook him. He asked me what I meant by planning. I told him I wasn't going to explain it all right now, but that I had conditions and they were non-negotiable. I told him to go back and tell Mom and Dad 3 things. 1, I would consider helping, but only after a face-to-face conversation with both of them where they acknowledge what they did. 2, any help would come with terms they'd have to agree to in writing. 3, Caleb himself was part of this conversation whether he liked it or not because he benefited from everything they took from him. He got quiet after that. Then he asked what kind of terms. I told him he'd find out when everyone was in the same room. He asked if I was going to help them or punish them. I told him yes. He drove away and I sat in that parking lot for another 20 minutes just going through everything in my head. 9 years of anger and it was finally time to use it. But I also realized something I hadn't fully accounted for. Caleb wasn't just the golden child anymore. He was a 22-year-old kid who'd been set up to fail by the same parents who threw me away. That didn't make him innocent, but it made the situation more layered than I originally planned for. My parents agreed to meet. Mom called Caleb within 2 hours of him getting home and told him to tell me they'd do it. The meeting was set for the following weekend, at their house. The house I got thrown out of 9 years ago? What happened at that meeting is going to take a whole update on its own. But I'll say this. I walked into that house with a folder and a plan, and they had no idea what was coming. Next update soon. The part that absolutely kills me is that this family had 2 sons, and they accidentally ran an experiment. Same household, same gene pool, completely opposite parenting strategies. One kid got the safety net, the excuses, the money, the protection. The other kid got the door. And 9 years later, the one with nothing is the one writing the checks. That is not a coincidence. That is a parenting autopsy report. They literally manufactured a man who could save them by trying to destroy him, and manufactured a man who couldn't save himself by trying to protect him. And the mom, is sitting there saying he owes them? Lady, you gave him 17 years of being the family punching bag and then a garbage bag as a going-away gift. That's not a debt, that's a negative balance. You're in the red with this kid. And Caleb with the family is family line. Brother, family is family. And your family kicked your brother out at 17 because you stole from a department store. That's the family you're defending right now. Sit with that. Update 2. If you're still here from the last update, this is the one you've been waiting for. The meeting at the house. And yeah, it went exactly how you think it did, except worse. I drove out there on a Saturday morning, 90 minutes on the highway with that folder on my passenger seat and 9 years of planning running through my head on repeat. I pulled up to the house and it looked rough, paint peeling, gutters sagging, lawn half dead. The truck Caleb drove to meet me was in the driveway next to my mom's old sedan. I parked on the street because I wanted to be able to leave whenever I decided to. I walked up to the front door and Caleb opened it before I knocked. He looked like he was about to attend a funeral. My mom was sitting at the kitchen table and my dad was standing by the counter with his arms crossed. The house smelled the same. That specific mix of old carpet and whatever air freshener my mom always used. 9 years and nothing in that house had changed except the people in it looked 10 years older than they should have. Nobody hugged me. Nobody said welcome home. My mom said she was glad I came. My dad didn't say anything at first. I sat down across from my mom and put the folder on the table. Caleb sat at the end, looking back and forth between all of us like he was waiting for a bomb to go off. My mom started talking first. She went through the whole situation, the mortgage, the missed payments, the foreclosure timeline. She explained it like she was presenting a business case, very organized, very rational. She said they needed roughly $22,000 to bring the mortgage current and stop the foreclosure. She said they had explored every option, tried to get a loan modification, asked extended family, looked into government assistance programs, and nothing worked fast enough. Then she said that I was their last option and that she knew things ended badly between us, but that family helps family. I let her finish completely. Then I asked my dad if he had anything to add. He uncrossed his arms and said he knew I was probably angry and that he understood, but that losing the house would destroy them and they didn't have anywhere else to go. That was his whole contribution. No apology, no acknowledgement of what happened. Just we're going to lose the house and we need money. So I opened the folder. Inside, I had a printed timeline I'd put together over the years. Every major event I could remember. The certification course my dad refused to help with while buying Caleb a gaming setup. The time they missed my GED ceremony because Caleb had a basketball game. The Thursday night they kicked me out and the exact words my mom said about me coming back begging. Every birthday they forgot. Every time I was blamed for Caleb's problems. I had dates, ages, details. I'd been keeping this list since I was 19 years old, adding to it whenever a memory came back clear. I slid it across the table and told my mom to read it. She picked it up and started reading, and I watched her face change with every line. My dad came over and read it over her shoulder. Caleb just sat there. When my mom finished, she put it down and said she didn't remember it all being that bad. And that right there is what made me glad I wrote it all down. Because of course she didn't remember. She wasn't the one sleeping on a couch at 17. I told her I remembered every single thing on that list and that I thought about it regularly. I told my dad that when he slammed that door, he created a person who spent 9 years building a life specifically so this moment would go my way and not his. My dad started getting defensive. He said I was always dramatic, that they were strict, but they didn't abuse me, that plenty of kids get told to shape up and they don't hold grudges for a decade. He said they made tough calls, and maybe some were wrong, but they didn't deserve to lose their home over it. I told him he was right that they made tough calls. Kicking out a 17-year-old was definitely a tough call. And now, I was making mine. I laid out my terms. I told them I would pay the $22,000 to stop the foreclosure, but the house would be transferred into my name. Not a loan, a transfer. I would own the house, and they could continue living in it under a rental agreement that I would set the terms for. Monthly rent, maintenance responsibilities, everything in writing. They would essentially become my tenants. My dad lost it. He started saying I was trying to steal his house while he was down, that this was blackmail, that no son does this to his parents. I told him no parent kicks out a 17-year-old kid with a garbage bag, either, so we were even on that front. My mom tried to negotiate, saying, "What about just a loan? They'd pay it back over time." I told her I didn't trust them to pay back anything and that this was the only offer on the table. "Take it or start packing." Caleb finally spoke up. He asked where he fit into all this. I told him that was between me and him separately, but that if he wanted to keep living in that house, he'd be under the same agreement, and I expected him to start contributing. He asked what that meant. I told him it meant no more free ride, that he was 22 and it was time to start building something. The same way I had to at 17, except he'd have an actual roof over his head while he did it. My mom asked for time to think. I told her she had 1 week because the foreclosure timeline wasn't going to wait. I picked up my folder, walked out through that same front door they slammed behind me 9 years ago, and drove home. 3 days later, Caleb texted me. Mom and Dad were fighting constantly about the offer, but something else had come up that made everything 10 times more complicated. I'll get into that in the next update because this is already long enough. But let me just say that my parents weren't the only ones who'd been keeping secrets about that house. More soon. This man walked into his childhood home with a folder, a documented, dated, itemized receipt of every single way this family failed him. And people are going to debate whether that's healthy or unhinged. And honestly, I think it's both, and I think that's fine. Because you know what? "I don't remember it being that bad" is the most dangerous sentence a parent can say. Every person who's ever been the family scapegoat just felt that line in their spine, because it means they weren't even paying attention while they were ruining you. It wasn't malicious in their memory because you didn't matter enough for it to register. And the dad, this man's defense is, "We were strict, but we didn't abuse you." And plenty of kids get told to shape up. Sir, you threw your child into the street in October because his 13-year-old brother committed a misdemeanor. That's not shaping up, that's abandonment with extra steps. And now he's calling it blackmail when his son offers to pay $22,000 to save the house? Bro, blackmail is when someone has leverage over you unfairly. This man earned his leverage on a couch with $400 while you were buying your other son a gaming setup. That's not blackmail. That's a return on investment you never made. Final update. Last update. This is the one where everything lands. So at the end of my last post, I mentioned Caleb texted me saying something else had come up about the house. Here's what it was. During the week, my parents were fighting about my offer. My mom let something slip during one of their arguments. When they refinanced the house a few years back, they didn't just refinance to cover regular expenses. They pulled equity out specifically to pay for Caleb, a car for him when he turned 18, a semester of community college he dropped out of after 4 months, deposits on 2 different apartments he moved into and then moved back home from because he couldn't keep up with rent. My parents had literally drained the equity in their house funding Caleb's failures. And that was the real reason they were so deep underwater on the mortgage. It wasn't just the job losses. It was years of pouring money into the same kid they always chose over me. And now, there was nothing left. Caleb told me this because he was genuinely rattled by it. He said he didn't know the full extent until he overheard them fighting. My dad was blaming my mom for always giving in to Caleb, and my mom was blaming my dad for not earning enough after the layoff. They were tearing each other apart, and Caleb was sitting in his room, listening to it all, realizing for the first time that he was the financial sinkhole that put them here. I'm not going to pretend I felt sorry for any of them. I felt vindicated. Everything I'd said for years about how they treated me differently, about how Caleb got everything and I got a garbage bag. And here was the proof sitting in their own mortgage statements. I adjusted my terms. I called Caleb and told him the new deal. I would still pay the $22,000 and take ownership of the house, but now I was adding conditions specifically for him. He had 60 days to find full-time work, not part-time grocery bagging. He would pay rent to me directly, even if it was a small amount to start. And he would sign an agreement acknowledging that our parents' financial collapse was directly connected to the years of unequal treatment between us. I didn't need a legal document. I needed him to put it in writing that he understood what happened and that he benefited while I was thrown out. Caleb pushed back hard. He said I was humiliating him, that he didn't ask to be the favorite, that he was a kid when all this happened, just like I was. I told him he was right that he didn't choose it at 13, but he was 22 now, and he'd been riding it for 9 more years while I was building everything from zero. I told him the free ride was over, and if he wanted to live in that house under my ownership, these were the conditions. He could take them or he could figure out the real world the way I had to at 17, except I didn't even have parents to fall back on. He agreed. Reluctantly, but he agreed. My parents were a different situation. I drove back out there the following Saturday for the final conversation. My dad was calmer this time, but it was the kind of calm that comes from having no options left, not from acceptance. My mom had been crying, I could tell, but she was composed when I sat down. My dad tried one more time. He told me he knew they made mistakes, but that taking a man's house from him was crossing a line. He said he built this family and kept a roof over all of us, and that had to count for something. I told him it did count. I told him it counted for exactly 17 years, which was how long he gave me before deciding I wasn't worth the trouble. I told him I built everything I had, starting from a couch in Dennis's apartment with $400 and a GED. And the only reason I could even sit here offering to bail them out was because they kicked me out and forced me to become someone who could. My mom tried the guilt angle. She said I was punishing them for one bad night. I told her it wasn't one bad night. I pulled out the timeline again and went through it line by line. The certification course, the forgotten birthdays, Caleb's shoplifting being blamed on me, years of being told I was the problem when I was the only one in that house actually trying. And then I told her that the worst part wasn't the door slamming or the garbage bag. The worst part was her standing there telling me I'd be back begging, because she was so sure I was nothing without them that she didn't even consider the possibility that she might be wrong. And now here she was, 9 years later, the one begging. She didn't have an answer for that. They signed. My dad's hand was shaking when he did it, but he signed. The house transferred into my name. I paid the $22,000 directly to the mortgage company. My parents now live in a house I own, paying me rent every month. Caleb got a full-time warehouse job within 3 weeks of our conversation and pays his share. I set the rent low enough that they can survive, but high enough that they feel it every single month. Every check they write has my name on it. Every month, they're reminded of who saved them and what it cost them to throw me away. I'm not going to pretend this feels like closure because it doesn't. Closure would mean I've moved past it, and I haven't. I still think about that Thursday night in October. I still remember the sound of that door and the weight of that garbage bag. But now, when I think about it, I also think about the fact that the house it happened in has my name on the deed. The woman who told me I'd come back begging writes me a check every month. The man who slammed that door lives under my roof now. My mom told me I'd be back begging in a month. She was wrong. It took 9 years, but it wasn't me who came back begging. So they mortgaged their house to fund the kid who couldn't hold down a community college semester or keep an apartment. A car, tuition he quit, 2 apartment deposits he bounced on. They literally converted their home equity into Caleb's inability to launch and then had the audacity to call the other son asking for money. That's like burning your life raft to keep the campfire going and then being shocked when the tide comes in. And you know what's devastating about this whole thing? Caleb finding out he was the financial sinkhole, sitting in his childhood bedroom listening to his parents blame each other for pouring money into him. That's the moment this kid's entire identity collapsed. He spent 22 years thinking he was the loved one, the protected one, and it turns out he was just the most expensive mistake they ever made. His parents didn't love him more, they just enabled him into uselessness and called it love. And this is where I gotta get serious for a second because people are gonna be split on this. Some people are gonna say OP went too far, that making your family sign documents and become your tenants is cruel. And I get that, but I need everybody to zoom out. This man did not have to spend $22,000. He could have sent a laughing emoji and changed his number. He could have let them lose the house and never thought about it again. Instead, he saved them. He saved the people who threw him away. He just did it on terms that forced them to acknowledge what they did. And people are uncomfortable with that because we've been taught that forgiveness is supposed to be free and unconditional. But forgiveness without accountability isn't forgiveness. It's permission. And these parents have been operating on permission their entire lives. Permission to neglect one kid, permission to spoil the other, permission to never look at the consequences. The part that'll stick with me is what he said at the end, that this doesn't feel like closure. And I believe him. Because anger that specific, anger you've been refining for 9 years, it doesn't just disappear when you get what you wanted. He owns the house now. He won. But he's still that 17-year-old standing on the porch with a garbage bag in some corner of his mind, and that kid is never fully going away. The deed has his name on it, but the damage has his name on it too. And the final line, it took 9 years, but it wasn't me who came back begging. That is the hardest closing line I have ever read on Reddit. That's not a mic drop. That's a man putting the mic down gently because he doesn't need to drop it. He already owns the stage.